Hello, everyone. We have a nice group today. Before I introduce everyone, I want to just kind of let you know, first of all, we're not going to talk about EVs. That was my joke, right? But some of the things that the other speakers already have talked about, which is that this is a highly commercial vehicles and the business of is a highly personal relationship industry. And as a result of that, it's been very, very slow to adopt and use technology. So today, the goal of our panel is to surface the areas that are changing and talk a little bit about them that will improve through data and technology, but also talk about where some of the challenges still are. So I'm going to start by asking each person to introduce themselves with just a quick overview. So Devin, let's start with you.
Sure thing. Appreciate it, Kathryn, and thank you for the invitation to be here. As Kathryn mentioned, my name is Devin Daly. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SpinCar. We supply digital merchandising technology to several thousand dealerships in North America, Western Europe, Australasia. And what our virtual tour technology allows buyers to do is digitally experience a vehicle as if they're actually at the dealership, walking around, sitting in the cockpit, learning about features. The interesting thing is, since we entered the commercial vehicle sector about a year ago, we found our product to be even more effective in driving engagement and conversion for commercial vehicles, given the uniqueness of each commercial unit, the complexity of additional features, and all those things that can be called out with our hotspot technology and explained easy with our feature tour functionality. So excited to be here, and thanks again to the Work Truck team.
And yesterday I heard a great word for this type of thing. They, one of the OEM people we were talking to called commercial vehicles bespoke. And I just loved that. It was really cool. So Janet, would you introduce us?
Yes, thank you, Kathryn, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the panel. So I'm Janet Vito. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Sales at uShip. If you're not familiar with uShip, we are a technology company that has been around for around 17 years. We are an online marketplace that connects people and businesses that need to ship large and bulky items, so things that cannot fit in a box, with carriers with empty truck space. So think of us as the Airbnb for large and bulky shipping. We service a number of different item types, including commercial vehicles, consumer vehicles, motorcycles, power sports, cranes, furniture, boats, you name it. If it can't fit in a box, it can ship on uShip. So I've been at uShip for about 3 years, and my background has been in technology for my entire career, helping deliver value to businesses such as Home Depot, Google, McDonald's. One of my fun facts I thought I'd share is my father was career Air Force, and by the time I was 10 years old, we had lived in 3 different states and 3 different countries. So when I was 5 months old, we moved to Germany. And when I was in the 1st grade, we lived in Taiwan. And when I was in the 2nd grade, we lived in Okinawa, but settled down living in Austin, Texas, where uShip is headquartered.
Great. Well, I'm going to go across the top, Lenny. Plus, you get to tell Janet something special about uShip, don't you?
Thank you, Kathryn. I appreciate it. It is great to be here. I'm Lenny Sims, Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for J.D. Power, but I also am responsible for what we refer to as the specialty division. And that covers boats, motorcycles, RVs, manufactured housing, classic collectible cars. And we handle all the specifications, the data, the valuations of that we supply to lenders, banks, dealers, credit unions, government agencies, what have you. My little story, Janet, is I have used uShip. I moved to Texas from California, and had my boat shipped from Arizona to my place here in Texas. And I absolutely thought it was a wonderful experience and very seamless. The person that transported our products and our boat did a great job. So kudos to you guys. It was well done.
Well, thank you.
Tony, can you
Sure.
tell everybody about you?
All right, good afternoon. I'm Tony Stinsa, Vice President of Used Trucks for Navistar. Anybody who doesn't know Navistar, we're a major commercial truck OEM in class 4 through 8, and the brand we go to market with is called International. In the used truck side of the business, we process and sell about 6,000 to 8,000 used trucks a year. We're largely a support organization for our fleet sales and our dealer organizations. I've been with Navistar about 25 years and quite happy to be on the panel today. And if I have to give Janet a story, I'd have to say I had a similar two-country experience, except my country's, I was born in the Bronx in New York City, and I moved to suburban Chicago. So those are my countries. But thank you very much and good afternoon.
That's great. Well, we're going to get started. We have almost 40 minutes, so I'm going to pose some questions. And we're going to start with Devin. And Devin, my question to you is, this digital disruption, e-commerce and accelerating behavior of consumers in general, how is that affecting automotive buyers, and how is it transforming the shopping experience for buyers of both? I'll let you do retail a little bit and then commercial too.
Yeah, thanks, Kathryn. Great question. And as you probably know, right, SpinCar originally started outside of the auto space, right? So we used to provide our 360 visualization technology to, traditional retailers, handbag companies, wristwatch companies, shoe companies. Got sort of pulled into the auto space and realized, we'd stumbled into a phenomenal opportunity, right? Autos, one of the biggest sectors of GDP, and one of the, at the time, in 2014, when we entered the auto sector, one of the last industries to experience full e-commerce disruption. And what we've seen in the last, year, especially with coronavirus, is a dramatic acceleration towards online purchasing, right? There was a Think with Google article that came out last month that found that over the last year and a half, online purchases of traditional autos have increased an order of magnitude from 18 months prior. And so today's auto dealer no longer can rely on, their top salesperson to make their number or sell, 15 cars on, the last day of the month. They realize that foot traffic is down massively, and the online showroom is really their last standing salesperson. And that's where they need to invest to make an impact.
It was interesting for me, and it was either the last or the panel before, but there was this whole conversation about the shipping of vehicles, right? And so I think that, Janet, I think I'm going to ask you right now what it is that you see happening when people are online more and they're buying that way. I'm assuming that's also increasing and creating more drive-through delivery, home delivery of vehicles, right? Isn't that an interesting approach? So I'm going to ask you to come out there. Yeah.
Sure. So we have definitely seen, completely in line with what Devin just said, e-commerce is accelerating, and especially in what I call the large and bulky space, but especially in vehicles as well. So where people hadn't felt comfortable buying certain types of products online they were forced to do it. And I think it is a permanent state. I don't think people will revert back 100% to the old way. I think e-commerce is here to stay. And what we've seen for our business is we've also seen an increase, because one of our, depending on the items being shipped, one of our big competitors is do it yourself. People will just go and take care of it, right? They don't want to hire out. Where now it's like, wait a second, with COVID, I have to take all these precautions. So we have definitely seen an increase from both our businesses that are shipping vehicles and other commodities, as well as the consumer space.
And part of what I remember when I first met Dean from your group was this concept that by using technology, so commercial vehicles are really unique, right? Mm-hmm. Each one's different. They're different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. And so to me, what was really fascinating is that you have the technology that allows me to define to you what the size of the vehicle is so they have a proper match to the shipper that will be able to handle that.
Yeah, and that, I agree, it can be challenging. It's not like a 10-car hauler that can neatly fit,
Exactly.
Honda Accords is going to have the right equipment. But the beauty with technology is that it helps businesses get access to a wide, diverse set of carriers that will have the equipment that could take these upfitted vehicles. The other element of technology, there's a couple of other areas where technologies can help with commercial vehicles that have all these extras, right? Another area is getting predictable pricing on what it's going to cost to ship it, right? So, and not being surprised when it's all said and done with another, invoice, so to speak. And so where technology can play here is through algorithms. Pricing algorithms can be developed and are developed where you could take a number of different data sets and not just the VIN or, just all those data sets and really fine tune and come up with more predictable shipping price. A third way is technology really provides a very efficient way to communicate, the nuances of a particular move. Having all the specs right there at the touch of your fingertips, including photos, that sort of thing. Without it, it makes it much more difficult and very much more of a manual process.
And even knowing where the heck it is and what all of that. I think it's really a phenomenal next step for what I see is the expansion and the ease for purchasing and buying. If you can, see the vehicle, like you said, Devin, and spin it around and, pop up I love the augmented reality buttons and see what it is. And then you've got the photos and you've got, the technology to kind of get it from one place to another. It kind of removes a lot of those challenges. I remember something that I heard early on, which is that today, because purchases for commercial are made around the functions, not around emotion, that 60% of commercial vehicles are already purchased sight unseen. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the areas where the mental transition may not have been as hard as for retail, where there's an emotional aspect to purchasing your next vehicle. So, Tony, I know that you've been in all sorts of this space. We first met, you were in the medium duty space, and now you're leading the kind of technology application to used. Let's all acknowledge that in 2021, with what we've been hearing and seeing around inventory being low, that there's a lot of interest and opportunity around used vehicles right now. So, Tony, can you kind of walk us through what you see right now as some of those challenges?
Okay, you're right. Right now, we're actually experiencing maybe a decade's low kind of inventory level that was fueled by some overreactions that happened last year with COVID. With defleeting and lots of things that have led us to this place. But I think your question was what challenges are we facing? And I think that I could sum up the challenge that we face in it's just the pace of change that we're seeing and can our organization keep up with that pace of change? So I guess the first thing that I'd highlight is there's a changing distribution model happening. So all day, I think people have been talking about it, and you've heard people say the trend towards shopping, making your first part of the shopping trip online, that has really accelerated quite sharply in the past year. There's a lot of reasons for that, but in our business, they actually couldn't come to the dealership. Our salesmen couldn't be at the dealership to host somebody. And if they wanted to go out and see a customer, they really weren't allowed. The customers didn't want to allow somebody onto their site. So it caused a default to a digital shopping as the first method. And, I think when you talk to all the digital marketplaces, Convoy is one of them, but all of them would say, that the business is up over 100% versus last year. And I think those shopping patterns have kind of permanently changed and they're not going back. And I think this is, it's pushing to the next step, I think, is going to be eventually, as you said, buying your vehicle sight unseen. I don't think we're exactly at the point where there's going to be commercialtruckvana.com or anything like that in the next few months. But the logical conclusion is that people, I think, are going to eventually just, do their whole transaction and get the truck delivered to them, probably without having to go the traditional route. So that's one of the bigger things that's going on. Another thing that's happening is just with the pace of change on inventory and pricing, there's this boom bust cycle that happens in commercial trucks. It can change really quickly, and you need to be able to get the market signals for both pricing and volume out of your business. And, traditionally we've tracked things like calls and how many visits people had and how many finance applications that we took. But more recently, in the last few years, we're tracking web sessions, number of leads from the web listings, how long people are staying on your web page, how many pictures they've actually clicked on, and so forth like that. And we've also got projects in place right now to automate understanding what the advertised pricing situation is in the market. So there's a lot of things like that. And then the last thing I just bring up is the cultural aspect to this. We're not at a place where we can totally abandon the old model. So we're kind of having to live in both worlds. And so this final challenge for us is cultural. And it's, Kathryn, you spoke about it a little bit in your open, but the leaders in the organization, people like me, we didn't grow up with a lot of the technology. We never even thought about a SpinCar unless that was on the Jetsons or something. When my career started, I think I was aware of somebody who had a bag phone. The people had beepers that sent texts, and I'm probably a similar profile to some of the leaders that are in this industry. And, now we have to be able to interact with people in the old ways, but also in all these new ways. And so to me, that's a big challenge, is to be able to go back and forth between these different distribution models while both are being used.
I love hearing that. I mean, the culture. First of all, I think this is not a surprise. I love this industry. I mean, it's just filled with hardworking, salt of the earth, backbone of the U.S., on very transparent, very open, but this real strong face-to-face handshake, ethical space struggles with online. It just does. I mean, and it's a completely different, it's easy to be hidden online, to not be who you are. And I appreciate that you mentioned that, because we want to bring people forward in the right way, and I think it's important for companies when they're looking at technology and how they are communicating to understand the culture of who their customers are. And for example, this is B2B, right? So the business is what's important. And Janet, I was thinking, have you seen much around any new types of businesses that are doing automotive or commercial vehicle shipping now? Did you guys separate out the businesses versus end users much? Are you able to do that?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we have both consumers coming to uShip to ship their vehicles. We have retail coming to uShip to ship their vehicles to consumers. We have B2B commercial vehicle shippers coming to uShip. And as far as types of businesses, we haven't really seen a shift in the types. It's just we're seeing more of it, and it varies from maybe they were, in their regional market and now they want to expand, or the pivot's more about their business model is changing. And so they're trying to adjust. But it has been the same types of businesses that do come to uShip.
Okay. Hi, Lenny. Welcome back.
Yay, Lenny.
Evidently, down in my part of Texas, we're not done with power problems yet. So.
Oh, my goodness. Well, evidently, when we talk about data and technology, it's like painting a target on our back, isn't it? So somebody had to do it, Lenny. Thanks for taking the bullet.
Yeah, no problem.
So I'm going to jump right in and ask you a question. How's that? So
sure.
What are the data challenges that have limited, this space transforming? We were talking about some of the cultural challenges. Tony brought us, the kind of living in the 60s kind of place. But what you and I both have talked about how data and knowing what the vehicles are, right, kind of limits things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would preface that a little bit by saying, we're fortunate in our situation to do what I term as seeing the movie. Automotive is very far advanced over a lot of different industry segments. RVs, boats, motorcycles all fall behind that. So we have a chance to see ahead of time what works, what doesn't work, where the challenges are, where they're not. In this industry, the technology is existing. Sometimes it is cultural and resistance to move that direction, but the pandemic has fast forwarded that for a lot of folks. The data issues are really around, I wouldn't call it dirty data, but in essence it kind of is. And an effort needs to happen along the lines of normalizing the data, making things uniform, and not just for today, but for the future, right? So when you start aggregating the proper format of data and you can start gathering that data and it is normalized, it helps you also develop metrics and to look forward into the future about marketing in the right places, about remarketing in the right areas. So it starts getting you to be more efficient about where you can remarket certain vehicles in certain areas, certain times of the year. So overall, in general, it's really normalizing data and being consistent in the nomenclature for that.
You're preaching to the choir here. The reason why Work Truck Solutions was started was a conversation that I had with the National Truck Equipment Association, the NTEA. Oh my gosh, I guess it's been 12 years ago now, about looking at the data that came to them about commercial. And of course, as you said, Lenny, each one of these different data groups, they kind of throw away the commercial data, but they don't throw it away the same way. So when I said, why are you guys not clear about how many certain, in different classes are being sold? And they said, well, it's thrown away data. We have a full-time economist. He gets the reports from 5 different resources. We merge it together and we guess. And I'm like, how can this be? And what it turns out being, it's really one elemental thing, which is that no one actually keeps track of what the vehicle becomes, right? So there's the VIN, but no one says, well, on this VIN now is a dump body, which makes it a dump truck. And so, my next question to them was, okay, well then how do you ever know who's buying what? And the answer was, you don't. And so I agree with you. It became more complicated. That was so simple to me. I went, well, I got to help fix this because these are really nice folks. But it becomes more complicated because, like what you said, Lenny, it's all about how people keep track of the data, and it's messy, and nobody calls it the same, and nobody even calls the things the same. In fact, when we created our first little what we call vocational carousel, we used these little wireframes because people would say different words and they would mean that one thing, but they called it 5 different things. So
there's a parallel in this industry that I see very close to to the recreation vehicle market and in the motorhome segment specifically.
Yes.
You have the chassis that are very consistent from the same manufacturers that are sold to 100 different RV builders. And it comes with a VIN. Oh, that solves the problem. Key the VIN, have a VIN configurator, you're good. But that VIN doesn't tell you the box on the chassis. Was it Winnebago? Is it a Coachman? Forest River? And that is where the mess lies within that. Yep. Everybody thinks it's fairly simple, but I see a very, very similar issue with what you have on the back of some of your chassis in this industry.
And, you know, Tony, I remember that when we first met, you were actually, you were in the medium duty space, but I saw you actually create your own kind of unique ways to compare. You know, you were trying to do market share in certain specific unique categories of things. And I watched you, you must have downloaded from, anyway. But,
I remember. I was
very impressed. I was very impressed.
I talked to you first, I think I was on a data hunt. And as you mentioned, that was my previous job at Navistar. I was in the class 4-5 business. And at Navistar, I kind of had this feeling that we were missing the boat a bit on the digital space, and we weren't advertising correctly. But I really didn't have the data to prove it to the organization. And, you know, so all I could really do, it was kind of like, you know, my kids would say I had this feeling of FOMO. You know, I felt like we were missing out on something, but I couldn't really prove it. So I reached out to a bunch of people in the industry, and one of the best pieces of advice I got was actually from a partner of ours who, you know, they were a panelist earlier today, but they pointed me in the direction of a couple of the national work truck marketplaces that we didn't have a very good presence in. And so one of the sites they pointed me to was Work Truck Solutions. And so one of the things I first noted is all of our main competitors were represented very well there, but my product that we were trying to sell was mostly nowhere to be found. And so I also, I looked at a couple other sites and I found some other interesting things. I found things that weren't just applicable to the class 4-5 business, but to the whole business. One of the things I found that was interesting was our dealers had grown up in the business advertising on a site that had grown up with them from print ads. And so that was the place where a lot of people advertised new class 8 trucks and mostly used trucks, but hardly anybody was really advertising class 4-5 trucks there. And so I started to try to create like a digital market share on these sites to figure out how did our market share compare to the other OEMs in the digital world, you know, and compare that to how we were doing in the real world. And, you know, as I mentioned, we had a really, really high market share of class 4-5 in a place where nobody was looking, and but a really low market share on the digital side of ads in the place where I think most of the class 4-5 customers were looking. So anyway, I ended up having to kind of create my own metrics out of available information that was on the web. You know? So that's my story.
Yeah, I loved it for some, you know, just go get it. I mean, that's kind of where we are right now. You know, we're trying to build a, you know, better data, better technology, and you just have to go get it and do it. And one of the things that we learned, and Tony and I talked about this, but I'm going to talk to you about it for a second, Devin, is that we learned that vehicles that have the price and vehicles that have more photos, which of course could translate into spins as well, right? That they get significantly more views. So what have you guys learned about that, Devin?
Yeah, no doubt about that, Kathryn. And coming back to a point that Tony made, right? I mean, we see the same thing in the auto space, right? The vast majority of dealer websites are nothing more than really a digitization of the newspaper, a digitization of your ad in the newspaper, right? You've got, thumbnail photos up in the left-hand corner, and then you've got some textual descriptions. You're not taking advantage in any way of the interactivity that, the internet offers today. So totally agreed with Tony's point there. In terms of the importance of photos, I mean, absolutely, it's critical both in traditional auto as well as in the specialty markets that Lenny was talking about, RV, as well as in the commercial vehicle market, right? I mean, if you think about it, the vast majority of interactions on a website happen with the photo area, right? If you think about the last time you bought a product, not a vehicle, because we're all in the industry, so we don't follow typical purchase paths, but the last time you bought a pair of shoes or a handbag, I can ensure that the vast majority of the time that you spent, looking at that backpack or those shoes was interacting with the photo area, right? Maybe you read a spec or two or a review or two. In the auto sector, we find 82% of vehicle detail pages interactions are within that visualization area. So it's absolutely critical to driving engagement and conversion.
What about pricing? Have you got any data around that?
Being transparent is obviously key. Yeah, I mean, the auto industry, 10 years ago used to gate pricing. So you had to submit a lead in order to get a price. Almost all traditional dealers have moved away from that. And yeah, I think putting your best price forward, we're seeing a lot of auto dealers move to a no haggle price. So, no negotiation. You deal with one salesperson and you get in and out within 1 hour is a new strategy a lot of dealers are employing. So and I think it all comes down to the same thing, right? Transparency is key, right? You want to build trust with the consumer virtually. You need to be transparent with your pricing. And a lot of our commercial dealers are actually also starting to be transparent if there's imperfections on a used vehicle. And so they're taking advantage of technologies that we offer, like damage tagging, like you've probably seen with Carvana. So, if a vehicle has a small dent or a ding, that dealer's proactively highlighting it, knowing that it's going to help build that trusting relationship with that consumer virtually.
And when you add a little bit more complexity to commercial, which is there's the, especially work trucks, there's the chassis or the van, and then there's the added features, the added upfit, and the added price, right? I think it's so critical that those details on the vehicle detail page be included. Lenny, I have a question for you. You've been around OEMs for a long time, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. In the specialty vehicle space, the vehicle specialties, I guess. Have you seen? One of the things that I get a little frustrated about is that OEMs often don't recognize that those upfits or after accessories or all the things that built it out for the customer are really important. And they don't, do you see OEMs trying to track that kind of data so that they can get smarter about who the buyer is in these specialty vehicles?
I've seen them get smarter over the years, but it wasn't out of concern for the buyers. It was, so what used to happen is the manufacturers would build a unit and the dealers would sell it, but they weren't fully loaded, so to speak. So back in the day, and unfortunately I was back in the day, you might buy a trailer motorhome and the dealer would be the one adding on a generator, adding on an air conditioner, putting an awning on the side of it. And there was a lot of money in that. Dealers, it was a good source of income. Well, the manufacturers started realizing, hey, we've got buying power. We're building 1,000 of these trailers. Let's buy 1,000 generators and 1,000 awnings, and we'll put them on our side and charge the dealer for them. And so it's kind of started along those lines.
Okay.
As things have grown and technology's advanced, and you can get the data that we spoke about, they are being more specific about what they build because now they're building what they can sell. Now, there are some manufacturers still to this day, as we've gone through the pandemic, they can't build them fast enough any longer, but they're still locked into this culture of this is what our model lineup looks like and this is what we're building. So for example, there's still a lot of manufacturers building 36, 38 foot trailers. Consumers don't want those. The wheelhouse is 28 to 30 feet now, and they're buying all those 28 to 30 footers that they can build. And there's now becoming some inventory buildup in the bigger sizes, but the small, the lightweight, the efficiencies, there's a lot of new buyers entering into the marketplace.
Right.
They're not going to jump in on a $50,000 trailer. They're going to spend their money on a $15,000 one to go out and do their camping. If they like it, they will upgrade as time goes on.
Yep.
So the manufacturers are, I hope none's really listening, but it's the truth.
Tony,
they're not as sophisticated as and I'm not talking about the truck market. We're talking about RVs in particular right now, even some boats, to be honest with you. But they are learning, and it's been a culture like trying to turn an oil tanker. It takes many, many hours and miles to move these things. And so some of them are grudgingly adapting, but they're still slow to move in many cases, and I think just as a real quick snippet overall, there isn't such a line in the sand anymore between commercial and consumer or commercial and retail, because everybody on this call right now, everybody listening is a consumer. So when you look at digital and you want to play that game, Devin knows this, your competition is Amazon. Your competition is eBay. It's these huge websites that consumers are used to the ease of access. As Devin explained, pictures, some specs, but you give everything up front with transparency. And so if you really need a true line of sight here, it's to just look around what you enjoy. That's really where everybody needs to get going. Is the transparency is huge. You've said it. I can't say it enough. And it would be very wise for this industry to look that direction as well.
I agree, and committing to it, because it is a complex product. We've heard it all along, but if we don't help people see and get ahead of the curve, the other part of how complex it is the kind of order time it creates, right? And I know Mondar was talking about that this morning. Knapheide has, he didn't really say, but I'm thinking it's somewhere between 2 to 3 months order time to get something. But if you can find it, in the locator that we put on their site, where somebody can actually go and find it on a dealer's lot somewhere and really see the details of the product, then they know that they can get that, and it will suit their purpose. And I think part of that is just what you said, Lenny, is helping people understand that's all we're doing here. We're not trying to, build something brand new in technology. We're just trying to level up this industry on what individuals are expecting now, what they're actually expecting. It's no longer just a benefit, it's what they're expecting.
Right.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm gonna see, is out of this discussion, does anybody have something that they'd like that crossed their mind they'd like to surface right now? Because we covered a lot of what we were planning to talk about. Anybody want to jump in with something?
Sure, I'll jump in. I couldn't agree with Lenny more that, the businesses that are buying commercial vehicles are also consumers, and they're buying consumer goods. And last decade, there's more and more of this expectation that what I experience as a consumer, I should be able to experience it as a business, like bringing my own device to work, all sorts of things, right? So I couldn't agree with you more. And, one of the things that a lot of the businesses that we talked to, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, they're looking to expand and beyond their regional markets. And COVID accelerated that need. Whether it's commercial vehicle business, whether it's a furniture brick and mortar that does some online sales, COVID just accelerated that. They realized in order to survive as well as thrive, they need to expand nationally, let's say. And so this acceleration, the need is there. And what limited these businesses before, at least why they were hesitant to go outside of their area, is because of the complexities of shipping and the costs and all of those things, right? It's just like this thing that just seems so overwhelming. And so, But the truth of the matter is the buyer is making the calls now, right? It's not like however many years ago when we didn't have the internet, when it was the seller making all the calls. The buyer is making the calls, and the buyer is a very informed person or business that's coming, to folks that are selling. And I would just say it's if you're in this business and you're not looking to expand outside your market, you're missing a huge opportunity, because the buyer's in California and you're in Florida, and he or she wants to buy your items. You got to figure a way to get it to them.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's much broader. I think that, is there anybody else who would like to make a...
Well, I mean,
real quick on that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to pick up on Lenny and Janet's point, right? Like, totally agree. It's the consumerization of the enterprise. Businesses are expecting the same experience that they have on, their consumer devices. And just to echo, how that pertains to merchandising, right? Consumers buy on sites like Amazon, or to your point, an example we often use is like Warby Parker, who sells $99 eyeglasses and sunglasses, and they've got massive, 20 megapixel photos, and they've got, interactivity, home try-on experiences. And again, they're selling a $99 product. And yet, we deal with RV dealers or commercial truck dealers that are selling $70,000 commercial or work trucks and have tiny, 240 by 380 low res photos with no interactivity and very little transparency. So I think that's a great example of that disconnect between what consumers experience when they're a consumer buyer versus what we often deliver in a B2B experience.
Yeah. And I think that, oh, go ahead, Tony.
I was just one of the things that is memorable for me here is what Devin talked about with, the transparency and pointing out the defect, and the importance of trust, as we do things more digitally. One of the things you're not really communicating that is, you're communicating certainly that there's maybe a nick or a dent on the car, but you're actually really communicating that, hey, I'm a dealer you can trust.
Absolutely.
Right? Because,
yep.
And so I thought that was really an important point.
And I'm gonna take that and end this with the one important thing that I've heard across all is this still is a relationship business, and dealers are still important in being able to consult with their customer. But let's all grab technology and make it better, make it easier, and make it a great experience for the consumers who are businesses. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to spend with us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good, guys.